Welcome, everybody. Today we have a really exciting guest for you. We have Bruce Baumgart. Bruce is, well, I should say Dr. Baumgart. He has a PhD. He's an entrepreneur. He is a computer scientist, and he's credited with playing and winning the first ever video game competition in 1972. So we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about his life and some really cool stuff. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
All right. So I want to start. I always like to go and I just peek into people's past. So you went to Harvard University, which is, known as an excellent school. So what kind of kid were you? How did you get into Harvard, and why did you choose to go to Harvard?
I was a complete mathematics nerd. I had advanced placement for both Harvard and MIT. And I went to visit the two schools and decided that Harvard had more trees and women and adequate mathematics. MIT was a little bit sterile. I did spend time at MIT in those years. And at Harvard, of course, computer science was named applied mathematics. So I moved from actual mathematics. Math 55 sort of killed my career in calculus. This is the advanced analytic, very abstract calculus. I decided that computers had more of a future than physics, although I was just very fond of physics as well. And the opportunity at Harvard was considerable because of the bubble chamber explosion at the Cambridge Electron Accelerator meant that the computers were idle pretty much for about 2 years while the accelerator was put back together. And so undergraduates were able to play all night with PDP-1 and so on.
Wow. So
at Harvard, my thesis advisor was Ivan Sutherland, and we did the first head-mounted display.
so that's
This was,
so that's
go
where
ahead.
that's where you got your interest in computer science, was at Harvard, and then from
No,
there.
no, I did computers in high school. I formed a club. I would go down to I was at New Trier in Winnetka, Illinois, and I read various books in 8th grade and so on about faster than thought and electronic brains, and of course this was the Sputnik era.
Sure.
So we were going to save the country by learning science, computers, mathematics. So I would borrow time. It was easy to steal computer time at that time. You just go into Northwestern University or Illinois Institute of Technology as a high school student and take a card and put it at the front of your deck and throw it in the computer, and you'd come out the bins down in the lobby. And
Yeah, that's fascinating. I don't think people realize that you didn't just have a home computer back then. And I mean, you know, you had
I bought a home computer in '74, which was about 8 years before people did home computer.
sure.
And making a home computer by winding relays or fiddling with the television set really doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of when I was a kid. It was the internet that people didn't have, and I would have to go to. I was like middle school, high school kid. I would go and play the internet at my local university because that was the only place you could do it. It wasn't anywhere else at the time.
Yes.
So why did you decide? So you're at Harvard, and you decide you're going to go on for a doctorate, move across country to Stanford. So why? What prompted you to want to do that?
Well, first off, schools encourage you to go to a different grad school than
Sure.
where you're at. And so the choice was pretty much the artificial intelligence lab at Stanford or MIT. And of course, California was, this was anti-war. This was the age of the hippies, of which so I ran away to California and joined the hippies and went to graduate school at Stanford and worked for ARPA, advanced research. So I only did 1 quarter when I first got to Stanford.
Okay.
And then I was still registered as a student, but I was an employee of the lab for 5 or 6 years before I went back to finish my PhD. I
Gotcha.
thought it was a good idea. So I was one of the people who kept the lab going, the Stanford AI lab.
So what did you want to do at this time? Did you have a plan? Were you like, did you want to be
Oh, well,
running?
yeah, we were going to have robot cars by 1980
Yes.
and intelligent robots that you could talk to, and and desktop publishing and fonts and computer ticketing was just a complete sideline. So I was going to build supercomputers for supercomputer companies, and we were crazy.
So who were your influences at this time? Who were the people you were like, you know what, I want to do what they're doing, or your mentors?
Oh boy, well, the major influencer at the AI lab was Professor John McCarthy, who invented Lisp. Before that, at Harvard, it was Ivan Sutherland, who invented computer graphics. And for high school and as a child, I looked up to my uncle, who was a chemist with Bell Labs in New Jersey, and so he'd tell me all these neat things about lasers in 1960 and so on.
Did you ever want to be a professor or anything? Getting a PhD, sometimes that's why people get it.
Let's see. It was research oriented. So the model was to do pure research at Bell Labs or at AT&T or IBM. Used to have a good reputation. And teaching and going through school required following rules more closely. I would teach a section or something as grad students do that, and kind of enjoyed that, but didn't want to really make a career of it. So I thought being an independent entrepreneur or a researcher at some major lab. So in some sense, I achieved that. I did entrepreneur, made some money, and then went back into research for the Japanese on robots. Yasuko in Mountain View was their front with a company named Yasuko. And we were doing mobile robots and the first LiDAR at Yasuko, and then the Japanese economy folded. I guess before Yasuko, I was at Xerox PARC for a year or two. And then independent, and then IBM Research for 7 years. I should look at the curricula vitae.
Now, so while you're getting your PhD, or while you were at Harvard, you encountered some video games. Is that correct? When did you encounter your first games?
Space War was the demonstration on the PDP-1. So playing space. It was called expensive astronomy or something. There was all these programs: expensive typewriter, expensive desk calculator, and so on. So it would do a dumb function like typewriter or desk calculator, but use $1 million computer.
Yes.
So this was kind of a student joke or a deck joke. The reason for the existence of that computer was to collect data from the experiments at the Cambridge Electron Accelerator. So it had I thought we called it a time sharing system, but there was only two users, the primary and a secondary, and then a whole bunch of experimental programs that would be interrupted to collect data. So it was actually a real-time data piece of software, and undergraduate students ended up maintaining that so-called operating system. And the best thing to do with the extra drone time is play Space War. But that gets boring after a while.
So where did you first encounter these games? Was it at Harvard?
Yes, at the Harvard, near the Cambridge Electron Accelerator. I was back for the 50th reunion. The building's gone. There's a different building there. The accelerator is still there, but it's physics. It's just a big physics barn. They were assembling sensors that were about to get shipped to Antarctica to detect neutrinos or something. So there was lots of physics projects and physics still at Harvard. But it's not an electron accelerator.
Sure. And then when you got to Stanford, they had these games. They had Space War at the lab you worked at, right?
That was yes, but it wasn't important to us. We were supposed to be looking at games like chess and checkers, for artificial intelligence, for strategies to search ahead and find the best move, optimization. And Space War is more like, another little trivial game was sort of fly the airplane game and land the airplane and Moonlander. So there was all sorts of variations on that kind of game. And they weren't, they were sort of considered sort of a sideline. So in that sense, games existed, games were tolerated, especially in artificial intelligence. They were not very well tolerated over at SLAC, the Stanford Linear Accelerator, which so I started in physics at SLAC, and it took me a while to realize that the AI lab was the better choice.
So did students enjoy playing these? Like, were you like, I gotta play games the way kids are today? Were you like, this is awesome, this is in this lab, this is pretty much the only place I can play this, I'm gonna go in and mess around and have some fun?
Well, these are grad students.
Yes.
Yes, indeed, we had trespassers and high school students and bright people, but it was just terribly unwelcome during the day because it impacted the compute. There's only one computer being shared by, or two computers. It was a dual PDP-6, PDP-10 at Stanford AI lab being shared by over 100 people. And you had to get your problem sets done and your work on your thesis and try to fix other things. So Space War was almost, it was not forbidden. If you forbid a game, there was other games that were more fun, but they came later, which is Adventure was terribly popular.
Oh, yeah.
People liked talking to the damn chat bots. Dr. Eliza, Perry the Paranoid. So the chat, and so when the internet finally started to rise up, they would log into Stanford to play with Perry, and we were completely bored with the Paranoid, as well as Eliza for that matter.
So eventually, your lab gets to this point where someone decides to hold a Space War tournament, and this has went down as being the first real recorded record of a video game tournament that we have on record. Rolling Stone.
Well, that was Stuart Brand.
Yes.
And Stuart Brand essentially was looking for this counterculture. Counterculture technology or alternate technology. He was over at SRI with, who was the guy who did the mouse and the, mental lapse. So Stuart Brand was writing a number of articles. And so he is researching culture and technology. And it was almost a joke that he put himself on the Rolling Stone article as a sports editor. So Stuart Brand, sports editor for the Rolling Stone. And also not so funny is Ann Leibovitz. You've heard of her?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
So, famous photographer. And so I was just a student there playing the game.
So they advertised this tournament. So, and I looked up the date, October 15th.
So Brand was in and around Menlo Park, Stanford, SRI, interviewing futurists, technologists, and his contact at the AI lab was Les Ernest. And Les Ernest said, sure, you can come over here and play Space War. He also visited, as I said, Xerox Park. And they were not so well received at Xerox Park. And Brand wrote about Xerox Park as well, and that caused a major embarrassment to Xerox. And Xerox said, take our name off of it. Oh, well. And that was a transition in the 70s between computers for the for government research and the impractical student type, and the gold rush that became proprietary software and patents and so on. Yeah, Space War did exist in 1970, but it wasn't the 5-person Space War. So it usually had been two spaceships. Let's see, over there. And then it became 5 with Ralph Gorin rewriting the Space War. Other people wrote the Space War games. Bill Pitts, Phil Pettit, they tried to make a business out of it after the competition in 72.
So they oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the 72 version of Space War was brand new and had 5 ships, and Les Ernest was the one who let it happen.
So they advertised this game. There's going to be a prize of a year subscription to Rolling Stone. They advertised free beer, and they said, "Come."
Not much of an ad. Just one email.
Yeah, one little message. And so did you guys practice? Were you excited, or was this just like, hey, this is something cool I'm going to go to and see what happens?
Well, no, you're there every night because you're working on your thesis or you're working on this or that project. So no problem. It did not require any scheduling effort on my part.
Yeah.
In terms of practice, I guess I was in an extremely good position because I was just too good at it. And I was playing the buttons backwards, so to play a handicap, so I could play other people who were just beginning. And then pretty soon I could play 2 ships and, hold it either way. And this is a lesson about skill. In order to ride a bike or play a violin, you have to get past thinking about your fingers. And pretty soon you just think about what you want to do to the ships on the screen. So it was really awesome and sort of a discovery that I could just will 2 ships to do a crossfire on somebody. So and the person who was actually a challenge went to folk dancing that night.
Oh man!
That's Dave Poole, deceased, super computer nerd. And he built supercomputers named Foonley, and his sailboat went down in the Gulf of Alaska, 1998 or so.
So you win this thing. You're considered the Intergalactic Spacewar champion in 72, which I assume was just a fun thing at the time. Like you were like, this is cool, and I'm moving on the next day back to my engineering thing, and that was it, right? Is that?
Yeah. There was no need to play Space War, and as I say, it was a sink on the resources, so we usually did not play it at night, or we play, and most people were bored with it. So a penny volleyball was more of a sport for the 5 o'clock volleyball game, and the penny ante poker game would be in the background in the evenings.
All right, so that's awesome. So you win Space War. You're considered the whatever. You move on and
then 50 years later, it becomes a big deal.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? This was my last question for you, but I'll ask you now. What do you think about that people are coming back to you right now and asking you about literally a one night thing that happened in your lab that was?
That's fine. I'm learning to live with it. I was at a class, a Zoom class at New York, something or other university about a month or 2 ago, and they just could not believe that esports was such a little thing to us that we said, and I said, well, but look, we built the internet, we built robot cars, we built publishing, and say nothing of the PC industry. So the people who were high school students or back row at that Space War game went out and made their gazillions, and some of them are not so nice anymore.
I get that. I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up with Atari, Nintendo. We would have our friends. We would always compete against each other, but I never thought this could be what esports is. I mean, I never.
It's interesting that it has turned into a major sport. There's other kinds of another thing that happened at the lab would be the spring orgy, where we would have a canoe race, a three-legged race, where they tie people's legs together. But one of the contests for the field day was programming contest. Now, why isn't that a sport? That you very rarely see a programming contest of, and then there's various kinds of hacker.
Yeah, this security hacker. I'm starting to see.
No, you've heard of Core Wars?
Yeah.
Core Wars, which is an assembly. You enter assembly instructions to try, and everybody gets 100 cycles, and you're supposed to try to locate and erase the other programs in the core memory. So that is more of an intellectual esport. Esports, of course, is game theory was of considerable interest to the Defense Department. Who was the Beautiful Mind movie mathematician? Nash.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That's very dark stuff. So, but that's very simple game theory. So is that a sport? A strategic combat?
It's fascinating to see. It's
so in some sense, historically, sport is a version for warfare.
Yeah.
It's either training or an alternate way to settle a dispute. And so the Olympics, of course, was organized by the Greeks, the Athenians, and the Spartans to train or to demonstrate how bad it will be if this was done in anger. Some of that is Stuart Brand's philosophy. I don't know if you ran into that book, Two Cybernetic Frontiers. And he goes on about how soft warfare is significant. But,
So you're in, so you win Space War, you end up completing your PhD, and you do a couple cool things. So let's talk about some of that stuff. So one of the early things, there's two early things you did that I want to talk about. The first one is the company which you just mentioned, Foonly. So you're a partial co-founder of Foonly. That was started by guys we're
with at the AI lab, which is Dave Poole, the Space War person who is better than I, Phil Pettit, who wrote a Space War game, not the one that we played that night, Jack Holloway. Others, anyway, so the MIT person. So they were doing hardware, and they did a very significant program called SUDS, S-U-D, Stanford University Drawing System, and their computer project was funded some years. It was canceled more than once. It finally became a company and succeeded at building a computer that was 10 times more powerful than the PDP-10 in 79. I was sort of out of it at that point. As my 7%, I was supposed to be doing the software for these people.
Okay.
Okay, well, and I'm happy to have handed that off to others because it would have taken way too long. So I went for the easier shot in ticketing, and I was in the computer ticketing because I liked the travel to Australia, China, Hong Kong.
So let's get into that ticketing. So you decide you work for Bass Tickets, you create a microprocessor for a ticket printer, and you go on to create you eventually go on to create an entertainment ticket company, Softix. So why tickets? How did you get into that? How did you get into that field?
I was drafted. So I got my PhD in August, and Bill Graham, the rock promoter, Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane. You've heard of Bill Graham?
Oh yeah, I've got a Grateful Dead banner literally hanging right in front of me, just so you know.
Good. Yeah. Well, we would in that era of the 69, 1970, 71, would go to the Dead and the Airplane concerts up in the city. And that's another influence on artificial intelligence. You get to see things in the city that you think you could do on the computer. And Bill Graham had a big problem with control data. Ticketron was the company that had a monopoly on all the tickets in the US. And Bill Graham didn't like that. And so in 74, there was a falling out, and Bill Graham said, I need a computer ticket system. And he asked his lawyer, get me a computer ticket system. And a junior partner at that law firm said, well, that should be easy. All we need is a computer wizard who can knock it out in 3 weeks. There was a ticket system that had just gone bust in Chicago, and Graham got the hardware, but not the software. And so the junior lawyer was a friend of mine from Harvard, and he said, no problem, I'll go to Stanford and get a computer wizard. And since I just graduated, I was available and said, I could do it in 3 weeks. So it took me 6.
That's awesome. So did you patent any of these technologies that you were creating?
No. We're talking. We thought computer software was totally free, should be shared with everybody. We were very naive.
Well, I agree with that. I think it should be, but yes, it's.
Many people do not agree with you.
Yes, I know that. I'm well aware.
And in that era, if you had, there was a huge split at Stanford because of the war protests, the anti-Vietnam War, and anti-government research at the university. The secret research was moved to SRI in Menlo Park. And we know those people, but they were doing the secret research. So that meant that the research that was funded by the government on the campus was not secret. And furthermore, it was supposed to be for the public benefit, public domain. It was not even patentable.
Gotcha.
And some people thought that was, they got away with stealing it and again and again and again. So I'm loath to document that because you don't wish to wake sleeping giants like Adobe, Cisco, Sun Microsystems.
Sure.
And Xerox PARC for that matter. So to work at Xerox PARC, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And we say, good grief. This is the same stuff we were doing at Stanford. Okay, well, the person who actually fought a lot of this was Richard Stallman and invented the open source licenses and open source. So I've been more on the open source side than the proprietary side in latter decades. I was a compromised individual running the ticket system and licensed it and so on. I'm happy to be out of that.
I'm a big fan of giving away knowledge. That's why I wrote a book this summer, free.
Yes,
I'm a fan of the open source, get information out there for people. I think they can do a lot with it, and somehow maybe that'll benefit me some way. I don't know. Maybe
it benefits the civilization.
Yes.
I'm surprised to be speaking to a person in South Carolina about this, but
well, I'm from the Northeast. I'm from Pennsylvania. My wife is from New Jersey.
You're sort of a yes.
We're transplant, and I've been living in Jersey, D.C., all over the place for the last.
And you're in North Carolina.
Now I'm in North Carolina at like the southernmost point. Yes.
Yes. You're dangerously close to South Carolina.
Very close. So you create Softix. You sell this in '87. When you sell a company, are you like, hey, I have enough money to retire and be done if I wanted to, or is this like not that kind of?
No, that's exactly what I did. I said I'm going back to research. So essentially I did. I did some things on my own, and let's see, I should try to figure out. Yeah, Xerox PARC I did after, so I went back to research at Xerox, which is not wonderful in terms of being open. And then after that with the Japanese robot company and the LiDAR, and then public disk. And so I guess that was sort of a turning point. I thought, wow, disks are really affordable. A megabyte only costs $1 now.
Yeah, let's talk about those two projects you just mentioned. What is this public disk project you worked on?
That was a first attempt at doing online storage over the net for anybody. And we were going to build acres of disk. And so I ended up pursuing that idea again and again. And sure enough, the price on disks was plummeting faster than Moore's law. Mm-hmm. There were some lots of interesting changes, and it's still happening with the SD disks. So I think that's a huge explosion in memory that a lot of people just missed. But it makes Facebook and Google and all these others possible, because you have rooms full of computer, and sure enough, I built some of those rooms. And those computers are just running cheap disks. And at IBM, they wanted to run expensive disks. So they were into enterprise storage, and I just say, no, it's not enterprise storage. You want industrial storage, or much bigger. And they said, well, but they're shoddy, and you lose 5% a year. And I said, yeah, well, you just work around that. You just build the boxes, and you can lose individual drives, and you just keep the books and don't repair them. Just replace the room. I did a paper on cargo containers for disk storage. I was very happy that the other one, Larry Page, showed up to hear my paper, and
yeah, that's awesome.
IBM said it was so worthless that I could present it at the Hackers Conference.
You did some cool stuff for IBM. So I read that you worked on IBM Web Fountain. What? Tell me about that project.
That's their Google.
Yeah.
So it was a search engine company, and I'm surprised that they gave me awards for the group, because I was always at variance with the company. I was hired into IBM to do open source and Sun Linux, Unix. The Sun Solaris. So I was the only person in this research building. I was not really IBM. I was a research person hired to do Brand X, where Brand X is Unix and open source. And it was really great, because I had a hardware budget. I could spend green dollars rather than blue dollars. Inside IBM, blue dollars have to be spent on IBM equipment. Green dollars, you can buy non-IBM equipment. So I was the only one in that building with a Sun workstation and a Linux, and here they are doing so you go in. Here we are on the second floor of Almaden. This is supposed to be storage research, and you're playing Mickey Mouse with time-sharing small quantities of disk. You get 100 megabytes in your time-sharing account of managed storage. And I said, but I got a 9 gig disk under my desk, and here's, there was a disconnect between what they used in their own office for storage research, because essentially the good people had died or moved on. So IBM Research at Almaden in the late 90s, who was supposed to see this revolution, didn't. And so for Web Fountain, I was running a pirate operation, which was all the storage and buying time for their other people to finish the development on SCSI over IP, and fiber channel disks. So there were other technologies that seemed more corporate, more enterprise, more promising. So I was not really liked doing the whole thing using dime store disks that failed a lot. And, but I had some co-conspirators there, Tom Costello, and Professor McCarthy was back as a consultant. That was amusing. That's how I started the Sail Dart. Ted Selker, who invented the little track. Yeah, you have them. Who did IBM sell the Lenovo? So IBM PCs used to have a little stick in the middle, a joystick.
Oh yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of our Stanford AI friends, Ted Selker, a smart kid who was there in the 80s, a decade after me, and who I still talk to, who still talks to me even on Zoom, invented that, and IBM gave him a fellowship. He was an IBM fellow. Then he went back to MIT, and then now he's up at Palo Alto now.
So you worked on some really cool projects with tons of, just fascinating people. What's your favorite project you got to work on? What do you look back on and say, that was a fun time. I'm so glad I got to work on that project. It was so fun.
Oh gosh, that's I get to revisit all these projects. Rolling the skills with storage back into doing a museum work and the archiving thing is my current project, and so that seems adequately fun. Really satisfying fun.
Yeah, I could ask, what was your what do you think was the most impactful project that you worked on? Like and those could be two different things.
No, it's I'm sort of horrified at the lack of impact of my various projects. So I used to worry about, I didn't make the a million here, a million there, I didn't join this one or that one. It's because if you're a frontiersman, way out there ahead of Lewis and Clark, killing the bears, running around the mountains, you don't get back to the city to tell them where the good stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really fun doing fonts and graphics, but that didn't turn into Adobe and everything else until later. I did my own spreadsheet. I did my own operating system. So in some sense, it's just a complete, I was able to have a lot of fun out there on the frontier, shooting the beaver and going up and down the rivers. And,
yeah.
And the fact that I didn't create an industry or even influence any particular industry that much. I'm sort of pleased to see some of my stuff slightly plagiarized. So the thesis work is occasionally mentioned. The geometric modeling, the winged edge. So little mathematical tricks are out there in the software. And I was a little bit pissed off at a company using winged edge as their name and didn't even tell me. But so I made enough money in the ticketing and bought a big house in Los Gatos and lived happily ever after.
So what you've been working on lately is the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, the archive.
Yes,
that's been what you're doing. So has that allowed you to keep in touch with all the the people that you?
Yes.
And
you get invited to all sorts of memorial services. It's getting grim as these people push into 70 and 80s.
Yes.
Yes, but it is nice to be in touch. There are some younger enthusiasts who I don't understand why somebody who was born in 1978.
I'm 79. Yes.
Yes, 1979. It becomes an expert in 1970 or 1968 computer, but there's a handful of these people in Germany and Sweden and even on the East Coast. So there's very few people who are interested in obscure computer technology, but they're very good and specialists. And so I wish I could spend more time on the GitHub and the Zoom.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm able to hand them huge chunks of antique software that they thought was completely lost. Yeah. So that is a thrill. It's occasionally a surprise to an old timer that all their email is right there on one of my websites if you log in a certain way. The libraries. So another thing that's fun is most of the results from the Stanford lab were published early and often and exploited and commercialized and monetized. But the original papers, the stuff that was left on the backup tapes, is what I've specialized in. And libraries can take them, save them, but they can't index them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they have. So one of the roles of the Sail Dart Archive is to become the archive observatory and to compare what the digital records show the document should look like in the 21st century compared to the piss poor scanned copy with the torn pages and the coffee stains that is in the military archive in Washington or this or that library. So it's quite something to go back to, so the Stanford, I talked with the librarians at the Green Library at Stanford who have the original tapes.
Yeah.
but they just keep them in the vault or something. And they have scanned images of the technical papers and the Ph.D. thesis. But I have the digital version, and then I'm able to put it into a digital form that can present a clean copy or a perfect copy.
Yeah.
And then the concept of what is a perfect copy requires an artificial intelligence, of course. It's whether it's static or dynamic.
Yeah.
And static, there's a convergence now on librarians, open source archives on PDF/A, which includes the fonts and the shapes and the resolution and all the timestamps and a lot of database stuff. This can't be automated. You have to have a human to certify that you have met the intent of the standard. Dynamic is still an unsolved AI problem, which is how do you represent knowledge? And artificial intelligence does not have a solution to that yet. So you wish to have the knowledge of the archive in some mathematical notation, and us artificial intelligence have failed at that so far.
Right. I mean, I think this history is awesome. I love hearing these stories. I love hearing about all this. I think that's why some of these people are out there still running the old stuff. It's important for us to go back and see how was this done and make sure we don't forget that we used to have these big mainframes, these PDP, and we had to use machine code to program them. We couldn't just sit there and use, whatever language of the day we want to use because we have so many to choose from right now.
Okay, I should get the pictures of the various huge mainframes.
I mean, they're just.
But we do have supercomputers still, and they're used in. I'm very impressed with the gravity wave experiments. Let's see, there's one in Louisiana, and then the other sensor is in Seattle, in Washington State. No, Eastern Washington, detecting the collision of black holes. Mm-hmm. Now, that brings you back to Spacewar, which was doing the mathematics for gravity. Mm-hmm. And the mathematics for gravity is open source, and that's very impressive stuff, and you can run it on your home clusters, as well as the various clouds, AWT.
And what other technology are you into now? Like, what do you see potential in? What are you interested in? Like, I see like your background. You've got monitors everywhere. Like, you're into some stuff. What are you getting into? What do you think is like? What do you think is exciting right now?
Gravity is what and I'm finally understanding the Einstein field equations. I'm finally able to manipulate the equations and make Einstein wallpaper. And nobody, so the gravity, the galaxy, the evolution of stars. Stellar evolution is just ridiculous. The progress that has been made there in terms of compute power thrown at how the elements are formed. And particle physics is not as interesting to me. I did participate in some of that having to do with certainly hunt for the Higgs boson. IBM was providing storage for that, and everybody was so surprised that a little programmer out there in the left wing of an IBM meeting knew about the Higgs boson. But
yeah.
But I came in from physics, and my son, his PhD is in physics. So.
Gotcha.
So getting back to physics is interesting. Desktop physics is just terribly interesting recently, which is you don't need accelerator or black holes. You just graphene. Have you heard of this stuff?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
You can put carbon atoms in a sheet because they glue together nicely. The first people were doing this would actually use Scotch tape to pull graphene sheets. Anyway, the graphene sheets, you can stack them, you can create superconductor. It's just weird stuff. That's all fresh this year. The graphene, I think, has been around for 3 or 4 years. Quantum computing. So there's another one that everybody saw, or not everybody. The great physicist Richard Feynman said there's lots of space at the bottom. And computers are not really digital. Did you know that?
No.
They're analog. We have gone to great engineering expense to make a flip-flop, to make it stay in 0, change to 1, and stay in 1. There are all sorts of edge cases where that doesn't work. And so, the electronics, the whole wafer fab industry is unreal in that it's made the digital world of zeros and ones like the mathematics, where the real world is quantum. So the quantum computing thing is promising, but it's still out there, decade or more. Understanding the mind, group mind, you have science fiction going into that.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's touched it. Even my friends don't want to talk about it anymore. There are crazy people like Kurzweil and the singularity people. They're weird, but we saw this singularity decades ago.
Yeah.
So I get to tease them. I say, singularity. You believe in the singularity? Well, I'm sorry you missed it. It was last week. We're all holograms now.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, it's been,
Yeah, it's been 2 hours or an hour and a half.
It's been good. We've had a good conversation. I think that I've learned a lot. It's interesting to hear about everything you've done, and I think it's just a fascinating history. It's like in the world of esports, you'll go down as the person who you won the first video game competition ever. It
was not a video; it was a vector display.
Yes, it was. I mean, Space Wars very different. It's a fascinating machine to look at and play the game like on an emulator right now. It's really interesting. But it was really cool, and it's just fascinating to hear. I thank you so much for taking the time and meeting with me today.
Okay, good. I look forward to looking at your YouTubes and the ones in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely.